Yeah. And the reason is there's a lot of people in their mid to late 70s that are ready to sell their business, have done quite well over the last number of years. And a lot of companies, not all companies, don't have a great succession plan.
No more excuses. No more branding band-aids. The art of positioning. Let's freaking go. How do you grow a family business without breaking it? And what actually happens when you acquire 2 companies in 18 months? That's what we're unpacking today. Wendy Murphy is the CEO of Timber Tech Truss, a second-generation family business her parents started in 1980. She grew up working summers in the plant, became CEO, then acquired 2 companies within 18 months. Suffice to say, she's been busy and inspiring as heck, staying outside of her comfort zone. So, Wendy, did the summer, like the childhood summers in the plant, mean that you had wooden Barbies or trucks instead of plastic ones?
Yes, we were very much an entrepreneurial family for sure. And that's definitely one of our values as a business, is that family and community. And yeah, just grew up, always assisting both my parents in creating a business, supporting the community. Many weekends spent, traveling. The Hotterite business in Southern Alberta was a big part of our family's startup business, continues to be. And so we spent a lot of time with my parents, just marketing the business, certainly business development. And, it wasn't an expectation, but we took a lot of pride in supporting the family with, answering phones and building trusses and delivering packages with my father in the early days. Yeah, I did get a little bit of time to, play with Barbies and ride bikes, but, the family business was just ingrained in us, and it was always a positive thing.
Were they made out of wood? Like, did you end up playing with toys that were from?
No, not very often. I think we were really good at segregating, this is work and this is playtime. So, we do have a family motto that, work hard, but also we play really hard too. So
I love that.
No, it was good. We had a very balanced life.
Let's jump right in. You acquired those 2 companies within 18 months. What made you realize that acquisitions was the right growth path versus, say, for example, organic expansion?
I've had some great experience with growth and scaling the business. And, I'll probably start with, as a family engineered roof and floor system wood component manufacturer, I just always had this desire of capturing more market share. We talk about brand, a strong brand in the marketplace. And so in 2007, just to put a little bit of history on it, I became a partner in the family business and started the Timber Tech Truss company in Calgary. And so as we grew organically, I saw a significant opportunity for growth in the market by acquiring one of my great competitors in the marketplace. And so in 2018, at that time, acquired one of the competitors. And so there was that experience of growth and scale, which was great. So we were growing organically, but we were also grew through acquisition. 2018, great. The family business, certainly the challenges during COVID and then the explosion in the marketplace, the direction of the company, I recognized there was great opportunity and a pivot happening in the marketplace. And, what usually happens, not always, is the first generation is in a different rhythm or place on where they think the business should go. Whereas, the younger management and certainly myself as younger generation saw a different direction that the company should be going to maintain relevance in the wood component manufacturing space. And so that's when we made a decision to part ways or sell the business. I wanted to go one direction. My parents were in their mid-70s, very capital intense business. And the decision was made that we would bring the family business to market. Mm-hmm. And so that was an amazing experience, really challenging. Talk about stepping out of comfort zone. Went through the process through corporate finance group, brought the company to market, had an amazing experience with interviewing, 9 private equity groups, selected a group that also had the same vision and support of heading down the direction of acquiring what we would call bolt-on businesses. And so the plan was to acquire some bolt-on businesses and get to a place where we're completely vertically integrated. Mm. And this is an opportunity. So we sold our business. I became partners with a private equity. There was full liquidity for the other family members, specifically my parents. And I was aligned with the new private equity partners. And an opportunity came up to purchase a stair company. Mm-hmm. And so within 2 weeks of closing our deal and becoming partners with the private equity group, this opportunity was brought to us that this stair company, again, strong brand in the Calgary market, very strong brand, great alignment with the owners. And we were able to close that deal in June of 2024. That was within 6 months. Then we were working on the next plan for the vertical integration, which included prefab walls. Yeah. And the supply of the entire structural part of the home. So the roof systems, the engineered floor systems. We then had the stair business. We wanted to provide prefab walls, and we wanted to install the entire project. So while we were working on that startup business, a colleague of mine that owned Darmac Framing, exact same model we were looking at doing startup, approached me about selling his company to the Timber Tech Group. And so that discussion began in November, December, in and around that time of 2025. And we closed that deal by July 1 of 2026. 2025. Sorry. The market being as strong as it has been in Calgary and then acquiring 2 other brands, it's been interesting.
You've got me thinking on a couple of areas just from that history. And the first is when you sold the business, and were there any surprises in doing that? Or was that did you go into the plan? Did you research, okay, what does this look like? How do we approach this? Who do we approach? Was there anything you didn't expect?
Definitely. I with every sale, and then with the latest, the purchase in 2018, and then the acquiring of Bride and Stairs and Darmac Framing, there's always surprises in it. And, having the strong management and vision in the direction you're going, it is imperative, because you really don't know until the company is fully acquired and you have full access to everything, the people, the systems, the processes, the balance sheets. I mean, you do see some balance sheets prior, but there's always more on the operational standpoint, the cultural standpoint. Not everything can be really considered or fully understood during the due diligence process.
It was quite lucky that, the name wasn't a personal name, right? It's a name that can be easily acquired. what were some of the other things that they checked that, that there are other businesses that might not necessarily pass through that?
Currently in this Canadian market, there are a lot of business people considering selling their business. And the reason is there's a lot of people in their mid to late 70s that are ready to sell their business, have done quite well over the last number of years. And a lot of companies, not all companies, don't have a great succession plan. And so being that I'm partners with a private equity and have gone through a number of acquisitions, I do get the opportunity to look at a lot of businesses, signed a number of NDAs, not necessarily for us to be looking at acquiring, but you definitely want to look at opportunities that come your way for your partners as well. And so there's a lot of companies that, one, either doesn't make sense or they're in a position where they think their business is worth more than it is, especially going into a down market and a environment, certainly geopolitically, that there's uncertainty. And so as a buyer, we want to get return on our investment. And as a seller, a lot of times as an owner, you're looking at, what this company has brought to you financially, certainly for your family, emotionally, psychologically, but those things don't provide the multiple or the value you need as an investor. And so, it becomes really interesting in this space. And I'm aware of those challenges as a seller because when we were selling our business, those are things we really had to talk about as a family.
It's that effect when you've built something, be it like furniture or you've purchased something for yourself, and then you assign it like a higher value, and compared to what somebody else sees it from the outside, it's not going to be the same. So that's a great thing to watch out for. And I think that leads into this question, which applies both for when you're selling your business or when you're trying to acquire businesses like you have done. Do you have any tips on choosing the right kinds of acquisitions to take on? Because I know that there's a lot of things that you need to look at,
Yeah.
But
so 100% definitely. And this is one of the things that I speak with our CEO at Westcap, Grant Kook, and very smart man. But the number one thing is alignment. So, of course, it has to be a profitable business. Of course, the future markets have to be healthy. There has to be something that, obviously that there's a demand on the product. The company has to be running well. The trailing results over the last 3 or 4 years. Like there's a lot of key things we look at when acquiring businesses, from revenue, systems, their processes, their procurement, and their culture. Those are sort of 5 key things that we look at. But the number one thing is alignment from, your guiding principles or your values. That has to be number one. Because similar to, maybe a marriage or, a very strong relationship, the acquisitions, even going through the due diligence process, is onerous and challenging.
Yeah.
But more importantly is when you become partners or you acquire this business, there is so much change and uncertainty happening. You have to have alignment because it builds the trust a lot quicker. And the return on that initial investment will occur quicker if there's significant alignment. So I would actually say that is by far the number one thing, is when we meet companies, there is an alignment, not just how they run their business, but their guiding principles and their values as business owners, for sure.
My gosh, I could not be any more in agreement with that. Be it like, I call them values, guiding principles. I think we can go another step, and for the listeners here, and look at what are the ways that they can look at those guiding principles. Is it, from your stance, in your how you approached it? Was it looking at their social media? Was it being like going into their team and watching how they work? Or how did you check that those guiding principles aligned?
The 2 companies we acquired, I knew the brand in the marketplace. So, geographically, I was acquiring businesses that I was already had some type of awareness or relationship with. And then the second piece of it really was meeting personally with the owners. That's it. Having a few coffees with them, how they conducted themselves through the due diligence process. It's very stressful, specifically for this seller going through the due diligence process. So, you have an outside source coming in. They're asking very detailed, probing questions. You can become very vulnerable. And during that process, you recognize some weaknesses that you have in your business, and how you deal with discovering those weaknesses will really reflect the type of company you ran, but also, as a past leader, how you deal with those weaknesses. Do you get defensive? Do you get angry? Is it something you take accountability for? So there's a lot of observations through that due diligence process. Even prior to the due diligence process, there's a lot of time that I spend with the individual prior to moving to the next step on the due diligence, because it can be very stressful.
Exactly. My God. I want to jump it back to the guiding principles within your business, and to ask, how have they evolved as the business has scaled, and then as you've as you've acquired these 2 additional businesses? So
the guiding principles have stayed very consistent over the last 10, 15 years. So in 2013 I had this amazing experience and was selected to attend a program called the Quantum Shift program from the Ivy School of Business in Ontario. And it was 40 entrepreneurs that were selected from across Canada to participate in this program. And from there is really when there was a huge aha moment for me of how important those guiding principles are in conducting your business. And so that's when we really, as an organization, stepped in, spent a lot of time on, as a family, what our guiding principles were. And I think maybe as a family, that was a little bit easier because it's really about the values of who we are as people rather than a large organization. And so those guiding principles, we spent a lot of time on it. What has changed a little bit is, and it's a little bit on the wording of it that's changed and what the meaning of these key guiding principles are. And that really comes from how the market has changed. Certainly since 2013, how you conduct yourself and business has changed exponentially. And I'll give you an example, innovation. Innovation in the last 5 years, certainly the last 2 years with AI, is a different comment or understanding of innovation than it was in 2013. 2013, it was more we're committed to finding efficiencies through process review and constant, improvement. And now it's like innovation is drastic and important and a key piece of our organization. So the guiding principles to me is everything. Who we hire, how we operate, how we align with people. It's even in like our recognition of our people every year. So we do, our employee recognition. It's what we completely stand for. Even, at this point too in our business, as we've scaled, it's sometimes who we choose to work with and who we just can't align with, like customers. And so I wouldn't say it's actually changed at all. I think the importance of them have changed a bit. And so, our guiding principles are respect, trust, accountability, efficiencies, accuracy. And so, we have a lot of wording around what that means: quality, experience, and professionalism in all that we do. That's a big one. So we're not willing to compromise quality. The experience is two things: the experience of how much tenure our key people in a management team have, but also the experience, the positive experience you have when dealing with us. Professionalism, how we present ourselves. Right now we're currently working on, upgrading our website, like how we present ourselves professionally. If we buy gifts or do an experience, it's a professional experience. If we attend an event, I'm very clear on my expectations of, how people can conduct themselves. Integrity. I mean, some people think that's table stakes, but my expectations is integrity in all that we do, including who we hire, how they conduct themselves on social media, all of that. And then the last one that's really important is team and community. And as we acquire more businesses, and the brand is really important. And, we're now scaled, 3 times the size of the company in 2 years, tripled our employee count. That team and community is more important than ever. And making sure we continue, despite the size of our company, that team and community is really important. But how we did it, in 2015, 16 to how we conduct ourselves with team and community now is a lot different.
So when these 2 new businesses were acquired, did they take on these guiding principles, or were theirs adjusted, or they were already similar?
Neither of them had noted guiding principles, but how they conducted themselves on a daily basis was a lot of these guiding principles. Now, not saying that anything was wrong, but as we came in, a lot of things we increased or focused on. So we will do usually, like, my mandate is when we acquire a business, we do nothing for 90 days. We do nothing. We get to know the company. We get to know their systems and processes, their people, how they conduct themselves, where they are on quality and experience, how they conduct themselves with community and team. And then we conduct, after 90 days, an audit on all of these things. So we'll do an audit, a full HR audit. We'll do a full health and safety audit. We'll do a full employee engagement audit. And so then after 90 days, we have a little bit of a baseline, but then we create these audits where we can go, okay, this is where we're currently at. This is where we need to be in regards to our guiding principles, our experience, our community, our team. And then we come up with a game plan on what are the key crucial things that need to be adjusted and what are the items that might be long-term. And then we create a map on how we're going to get there.
That's exactly where I see a lot of acquisitions fall apart. The focus goes So the operations and the systems, but the messaging and the positioning, those get left behind. And that includes, these guiding principles, these values. And, I've been working with business owners who have grown through acquisition or major pivots, and they're realizing that their brand positioning hasn't kept pace with where the business actually is right now. And before you can get teams aligned or customers on board, you need to know where your positioning is broken. I've built a brand health check that diagnoses exactly where those gaps are, whether it's unclear differentiation after an acquisition, confusing messaging, or misaligned values, and immediate actionables that you can work on right away. That is something that you can actually grab from the show notes. I'm going to stick it below, but that is definitely something to look at internally. And looking internally, how did you get these 3 different teams who've used different systems for years to embrace one centralized one without having a revolt?
And it always, from my experience, takes longer than we actually expect. But what I would attribute the failure or success of integration of one system is the leadership on it. Mm-hmm. So you definitely need strong leadership. And the strong leadership comes, and that's one of the reasons we really don't do a lot for 90 days, is because the trust ladder needs to be created. There's always things that we come across that we're not expecting. And I always say also, we have experienced leadership. And what I really mean is that we're older. And so I do love being in my 50s because my reaction to change and unexpected hiccups and challenges and how people react, I think how I dealt with that in my 30s was defensive, more angry, demanding. Whereas now I'm expecting these challenges. I'm expecting that things come up that we didn't expect. And as leaders, you have to have the skill set to manage through that, support your people's frustrations, and they're frustrated because they're inefficient in what they need to accomplish for their performance indicators. And also having some empathy, but supporting the team and getting across these obstacles. And so integration is never easy. I would say on average takes a little bit longer, but you really have to understand change management. And change management is a psychological and social challenge. It's not about someone who doesn't want to do things that are better. There's so many different emotions, psychologically, emotionally, that are attached to making change. And, strong management have to understand that to accomplish it. And you also have to have a strong management that has to make the change. So it may not progress as fast as you want, but if you have any weak point in the management group that allows for a step back from the integration because it's difficult or challenging, because there's times where you're like, what are we doing? You have to have strong management that understand the vision and the direction we're going despite the obstacles and the challenges. That's what I mean by strong management.
So is that something that you feel like has backfired in the change management, the leadership where you've had to adjust and pivot on that?
I've learned that if you have one weak point in your top management that doesn't make progress, that person is sending the message that this is difficult. This is too difficult. Let's go back to our old ways. And then you don't have a team that will make the change happen, for sure.
So it's very much like tracking the mindset of the leaders, the heads, and making sure that like, hey, this is tracking with the direction we want to be going in. So is it focused? Because I know you've mentioned the emotions and then there's the actual changes. Do we prioritize the emotional side of things? Like, do we consider that first? Or it's like, hey, this is the change. These are the kinds of responses that we might be getting. And, or is it like, okay, this is, this is what we have and let's see what comes back from that.
We approach it first. So what we will do is a workshop on change management with everyone. So the other interesting thing that I've learned through acquisition, my third acquisition, and my experience as well, like when we sold Timber Tech, became partners with private equity, is what we communicate to our employees is nothing is going to change, or what they're hearing is nothing is going to change. And what that usually means is the brand. Like, we are going to still be called Timber Tech. We're still going to be all building, designing, servicing roof trusses and floor systems, or stairs or walls. What people are actually hearing is that they're going to show up at work for the next 5 years and nothing's going to change. And that is so wrong. And so it's not intentional. I just think the sellers have really no idea what's about to come. And although, we coach on that, but I think the intention is, and it's human nature, where they don't want to disrupt and scare their employees because they recognize that, like, oh, there's an alignment with Timber Tech and their ownership group. And, that's not going to be super disruptive for you. But now I'm like, no, everything's going to change. And it's not everything. You're still going to be building trusses. You're still going to be stairs and walls, but there's those audits that are done and things have to change, So what we have done in the past is provide a professional day with leaders in each organization talking about what change management means and how that will, knowing that, one, we're open to understanding your challenges emotionally, psychologically, and, disruption. But this is a normal cycle. And so we're here to support you. So now let's go make these changes we need to make to run this business, not to our standards, but more efficiently and effectively as a group.
So I imagine this is also the opportunity for them to also voice any concerns that they might have, where usually sometimes we see it just goes into like, hey, nothing will happen. And then suddenly like changes start happening. They're like, but they don't have the opportunity to say anything. So I imagine that this day or these days would be like, guys, if you have any concerns.
Well, this is one of the reasons we don't do a lot in 90 days. We want to build the relationship. We want to build an environment of team, community that, it's tough in 30, 60, 90 days, but also with this professional development day on change management, our objective is to say, listen, we know this is going to be hard. Prepared to have these reactions, but we understand that as well. And we're here to support you, communicate what's happening, building that trust, building that community, that team. So when the changes do occur, it's never perfect or smooth, but we've created this team or this communication that it can be open. And also there's always hiccups. If we don't hear from the people in the weeds going through these challenges, it'll never get implemented properly.
Say you acquire a third business, what would you do differently internally? Because we're about to step into externally in a moment, but what would you do different internally?
My past, some things have run really smoothly. Some integration was not smoothly. not done smoothly. So if or when we acquire another business, I would make sure that before we implement anything, we have a full understanding of their current setup and system. So if I can give an example, we're currently integrating a new ERP system. But the ERP system that we implemented for our truss division went really smoothly. It was the right choice. Now with the stair company, it's going pretty good, but we're missing some modules for what we need for the wall and framing business. So what I'm discovering is some of the skill set that our strong management team, executive team members had as a truss company, they're not quite, and this is actually with our IT, our HR company, our health and safety company, we've outgrown their skill set. And so what we're discovering is, an integration of the ERP was great for the truss company. And then it worked pretty good for the Bryden. But then there was an assumption that this ERP system was going to work for any of the companies we acquire. There wasn't enough effort and time and leadership going into what the new company actually required. And so that's just an example where just because the ERP system integrated well for the two companies, we really need some strong leadership to really understand and not assume that this ERP system has all the modules and information we require. So that was the lesson in this specific is before you make a system change, you really need to understand what works for one company, that same ERP system may not work for another. And we failed in really comprehending what they currently needed. And yeah, it's been nothing we can't handle, and we're on it now, but that was a learning experience for us.
There was another conversation previously in the podcast where we were talking about like having a employee chart, but like pacing forward in the future, being like, hey, this is what that's going to look like. So it's almost like you're already anticipating, you're planning out how to grow those positions or how to perhaps change out people that might not necessarily be able to grow, and know when that's they're not able to pass this point. Maybe we need to have a look at changing this.
And these are things that a lot of people, appreciate you bringing this up. I never thought, or I quickly recognized that the current organizational chart wasn't going to work. It's like systems, processes, business development. What works as a company, this specific size, once you get to some pretty large benchmarks of revenue, people, those systems don't work. And that's the same with organizational charts. And so, but there's also that period of time where you're bringing in these companies, and it happened quite fast. Our teams were wanting clarity for sure. Like, who's answering to who? What does this mean? You're hiring a VP, corporate VP. What does that mean? But what, again, we've discovered is like the vision we had, a year ago from what this org chart is looking like and how it's playing out is different. And so you need to have some, patience, but also you need to have some forgiveness on yourself, or understanding that, maybe your first few ideas of this isn't working, and it's okay to make change, and it's okay that your original vision was wrong, because we working with people every day. And so the skill set, I thought maybe, and I don't want, there's no one specifically, the skill set maybe the CEO had at this size of business, he or she may not have the skill set for the full integration. Just an example. And you just really, one of the things that we have decided as a business, and certainly our executive team, and is although there's a ton of opportunity for growth through acquisition, we're just like, listen, we're stabilizing right now. We're in a moment of stabilization because it's very important for our people so that we can keep in tune with our guiding principles. And a lot of times what happen, and it's fun and it's exciting and it's great, where you're like, I'm going to buy this company and I'm going to do this and I'm going to grow this and and I was like, whoa, like I don't want to destroy our brand. We need to be strategic on this because the bigger you become as a company, the more complicated it becomes. And so I'm all about growth, responsible growth, but that can come collapsing down really quickly. And so you got to keep things in check for sure on that.
Absolutely. Avoiding all those shiny things. And I think that's regardless of the size of the business, there's always a shiny thing. Oh, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do that. Hey, hang on. Like, is that staying true to those guiding principles? Is it staying true to like the overall market position that you're trying to focus on? So that is incredible. And look, we spoke about internally. Now, externally, what's been the biggest challenge in getting customers to understand what you do now versus?
Yeah, again, great question. When you're in it and you know the strategy, you're like, why are people confused? Like, I just, we acquired a stair company and then we acquired but really, really important for the messaging and the marketing of what is being offered. And it's also confusing internally. Like, what does this mean for me in the truss division? What does this mean for the stair company? And so there's been a lot of work being put into the communication piece. We're 3 separate companies, but the fact that we are vertically integrated, there's lots of options for our customers depending on their strategic plan moving forward on how they build homes. And so, we are currently, we're a little bit behind on that, I'll be honest. But, again, it's just really lots of communication with our longstanding builders and continuing to focus on our customers that we're aligned with. And, just continual clear communication on, what our plans are, what we're doing. I think I mentioned, we are working on new actual branding so that there's more continuity because we have 3 very distinct brands, like logos, that sort of thing in the market. So we are working on a simple rebranding. But what's very important to me is that the rollout of it, and this is, maybe I said we're a little bit behind. There was a strategic decision to that. So I didn't come in and acquire 2 companies and change the brand. Yeah. It's been strategic because I wanted to make sure there's an understanding of it first. And that's been, it'll be 2 years since the Timber Tech Truss company was acquired. After 2 years, people will have an understanding of what we are offering the market, but we just want a little bit of continuity, but it's just a logo change. I don't want us, and we've gone down this path a little bit, and I've had to bring people back in. Like, let's not forget experience, quality, and professionalism in all that we do. We're not looking to change who we are, or make it splashy and big. And I just want a little bit of continuity to bring the three companies together. But that's after people in the market understand, what we're offering and why we've acquired these other businesses, because they do have to sell separately as well to be successful.
Having three distinct things, three distinct areas, it is very much like, okay, how do we balance these three? Like, is it they come under the one overarching brand, like the parent brand, and it becomes like, the Virgin thing, or like where the name is there, but like that essence, what people, existing customers already know the brand for, like that is still there. And there's like the little bit at the bottom, Timber Tech, at the bottom going, hey, this is coming together. So like the association starts building, like, hey, we're connected. So, say for example, I also need, stairs. That's connected there in their minds as well. So that is an interesting process. Probably we don't necessarily have time in this episode to go through the different kinds of structures, but suffice to say for listeners, like, it is really understanding what is the direction of each of the brands. I mean, also another big one is each of the brands going to do their own marketing, or does that come to the parent brand? Is that going to be doing the marketing for everyone? Because then that also comes into consideration for like, what does that look like? So I'm going to be very interested to see how this evolves for each of like the sub brands for the parent brand.
It's a big undertaking, and a really important one. Like, it's a really important one. So it's not something we wanted to rush into. And also, like, we were you're discussing, and I've listened to a number of your podcasts, is the key thing is really making sure our customers are not confused. And that's through communication and a lot of face-to-face communication on that. Because I think if you quickly change even a logo, and, the three logos of the companies that have come together under the group of companies are well-known logos. So to go and make a change can be really confusing. It's a process that you need to be patient on, for sure.
It's definitely not something I would jump on and be like, change immediately. It's like you going to the supermarket and wanting to, you go there for your favorite ice cream, and then suddenly you don't see it there on the shelf, but like you're looking for the logo or that specific packaging, and then it's not there. And then you go and pick up another one only to realize it's the same name. They've rebranded. You're like, or you completely miss it. So you're either losing customers because they haven't recognized it, be it on Google search, be it in advertising, etc., or they're like kind of disappointed, like, wait, does this mean like the brand has changed, like all these values?
I would say don't underestimate the psychology around change management, and externally. Don't underestimate it. You have to be, I think that's one of the biggest lessons in acquiring business is patience. Strategic patience is imperative to make the combining of businesses to be successful. Things just don't happen overnight. And if you come in like a whirlwind and make significant changes on the brand and the people and the integration of systems and processes, that could be a big disruptor.
So I want to go back into like the communication and what we were just talking about here about maintaining that communication. When you had those initial, like, okay, this is the change management day, this is like your opportunity to voice any concerns, etc. Was there a lot of discussion around how, the customer?
Yes. The key thing for the customer facing is to continue to provide the communication and the level of service that our customers are expecting. I kind of say it's, some days or times it's a little bit of like duck on water. Like, we do not want to have the customer. Number one is the customer experience. So if we are failing, or, we have a launch day of January 1 for this process and it's a complete failure, which hasn't happened yet, but there's always hiccups. Like, I haven't talked to one entrepreneur where, launch day is January 1 and there isn't something that comes up. But the biggest communication is it does not affect our customers. And that one is you have to set the expectations of that, but you also have to provide the support to the people who are frontline, letting them know that, yes, be prepared. Like, this may not launch perfectly, but we are here to make sure it happens and that we get you on track as soon as possible. Recommendations are we don't panic, and so it's really a lot of what some people may think of as, obvious information. But, giving it a second discussion or a few extra minutes on the what ifs is really important. This also goes back to guiding principles. So if you have your team members who are aligned with you with respect, accountability, transparency, team experience, quality, professionalism, it's a small conversation. Because the people who are customer facing certainly have and live and work by those guiding principles, then the disruption that occurs through the customer facing possible hiccups, we're fairly confident that, yes, we may be transparent, but we're, being respectful. The customer trusts us. We trust them that things will be taken care of. That's a big one. One of the key sayings we have in our organization that, again, align with our guiding principles is we will not compromise conduct over performance, and we won't compromise performance over conduct. And so what I mean by that is, we can have an amazing person who has the skill set that makes our company money. But if he or she can't conduct themselves well, we can't compromise that. And the other way around, we've all worked with men and women who are incredible people and so kind and really great humans that we'd love to have as a next door neighbor. But if they don't have the skill set, we also can't compromise that. And I don't think we're perfect at that, but when we're going through change and growth and having to pivot businesses as we all have, if we have the right people on the teams and they have the right skill set, they have the right conduct that are in line with your guiding principles, life is, certainly as the CEO and leadership, you're still going to have hiccups, but it's certainly not the challenges that, I've had in the past with our organization, or a lot of organizations have, that will compromise conduct or performance just to make money.
That reminds me of another episode in this season where we were talking about the risk management side of things. Because, as you said, there's so much that can go wrong. And it is, taking that moment of being like, okay, well, if these things go wrong, these are ways that, from the front end side, this is how you might be able to communicate to, instead of going, I don't know, like, I'm not sure, like, it's like, okay, well, this is happening. We're going to let you know in XYZ period of time. Just making it super clear. Like, it's almost like templates for the customer service side, for the sales side, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by customer experience. And, really, when I walk into a restaurant and, every server, hostess, bus person, chef, whatever, is positive and accommodating and empowered to make decisions, I'm like, this company, this restaurant has strong management. And they've trained them and they've set the expectations of what their conduct and performance is. And so whether it's a restaurant or a retail business or, anything like a construction company, a home builder, electrical company, like it's almost like you can feel that those companies have put in the energy and the time to set the expectations of their conduct and their performance, for sure. And so, I mean, even like we can get into performance indicators, it's very clear when we do our coaching, annual reviews, that sort of thing. It's very clear to our people what we expect from their performance. And then also, based on our guiding principles, what their conduct is. And so it's pretty simple to coach and decide, I shouldn't say it's simple. I mean, there's obviously gray area. There's a lot of, we're dealing with people, but it is certainly easier when you set the expectations of what the company wants for conduct and performance.
I think also making it very clear as to what that looks like. I think a lot of the times in the businesses that I see, it's like, okay, this is the vague kind of KPI. This is like, okay, you need to achieve this subjective word, insert subjective word. And you're like, okay, but this could mean something very different to me and the next person. And it's almost like, the leaders need to get in there and they just need to show like, okay, this is in writing, but like, this is what that actually looks like. And these are the kinds of things that you could be doing to, say, for example, get to that next performance review and be like, yeah, these are the marked, improvements. These are things that, okay, you struggle. There's these reasons, but like, these are ways that you could improve that. And like, even having them come back like, hey, knowing what are the things to improve, because oftentimes, employees come in and they're like, just waiting for...
like, come to me with solutions, come to me with ideas. Here's your performance indicators, like talk about gray area, like professional development. So, we're very clear on our expectations are, depending on what level you are in the organizational chart, minimum, 60 hours a year for executives, minimum, 40 hours for management and so forth. And, that can be a gray area, but you have to prove it. Like, our expectations are, if you're a frontline person, we're available, we have budgets for you, but that's on you to sign up for, the professional development. And usually we see, a lot of other performance indicators are tracked, measured, dashboards available, but it's those gray area things, which are aligned usually with our conduct on professionalism and quality and experience, that, a lot of times you can tell someone at their, and we do lots of coaching through the year, but like their annual review, you have to come to us. And usually we can tell those who haven't performed their professional development hours, for whatever reason. So, yeah. It's important.
Love it. Oh my God. That's a whole rabbit hole we can just go down into. It's actually supposed to be all in, like, what's going on with the employees, what's going on externally, internal, etc. So maybe this question is in two parts, but it's up to you. If you were advising another business owner about how to, about acquiring another brand or perhaps selling their business, what would you tell them to avoid in both instances?
Okay. So if you were the owner of the company, like not the CEO or anything like that, if you were the owner and you were wanting to sell your business, I would have two pieces of advice. One is really understand how buyers, whether that's a strategic buyer or a private equity buyer, values your business so that you can have realistic expectations when you're going in to sell your business. Also, if you want full value of your business, it's not just your trailing results, your trailing EBITDA numbers. There's so many other factors on how you evaluate your business, and it has to be objective. It's not what you think your business is worth. There are formulas out there, and it really depends on the timing of selling your business. So I think that's one thing. It cannot be an emotional decision. You really have to understand and manage your expectations of what your business is. Sometimes it's more than you expect, but really manage that expectation. And the other one that I think is really important, and I've said to a number of colleagues in the past, is never put yourself in the next chapter of your life until the deal is complete. And I say that because the process is onerous. And at any time through the due diligence, and I've seen it many times, not personally, I have seen it personally years ago in our family business, but I've seen it with a number of colleagues that even the week before the closing date, the deal doesn't go through. So if you're a business owner and you're already in the next chapter, you're incredibly disappointed. And you need to continue running that business so it's profitable for you. The other thing is when, really, to me, the value of using a corporate finance group, like an M&A group, to me, is invaluable. And the reason I say that is there is a ton of work required. We spoke about it earlier, where due diligence, you are digging deep. And it's not always to find the weaknesses, it's to find the weaknesses in the businesses that we're acquiring, but it's setting us up as when we acquire this business after the closing date, we understand the key things we need to work on and improve on. So it doesn't always mean that the value of the business is less. We're just finding out where the strengths of this business are and where the weaknesses are. But having a corporate finance or some type of consultant that can assist you through the 90 to 120 days of the process is, to me, very valuable, because what happens is a lot of times the key management are not focusing on running the business. They're focused on trying to get the sale across. And a lot of business development strategies are put by the wayside. And so if the deal doesn't go through, or even if the deal does go through, if the business doesn't continue to run for 90 or 120 days with clear movement forward strategies addressed, the value of the business decreases. So that would be some advice for the people selling their business. Some advice for people buying the business is make sure you keep your ego and emotions in check. So what I mean by that is it's exciting to buy a new business. It's exciting, especially if it's in line with your vision of the company. But through the due diligence process, if it does not make sense, you have to take the emotions out of it, because if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. And that's a tough conversation to have, but
Yeah.
it's okay to step away.
So the big one is stay present, stay in that moment, do what needs to be done in the business while that's happening on the side. Like nothing is guaranteed until
the cash is in the bank.
Things are signed, things are like the payments are through.
Yeah, anything can happen. Anything.
And even then, I imagine there might be some clause where it's like, within a certain period of time, there might be a change of mind.
Well, not a change of mind, but usually in deals today, in the construction side of things, majority of deals there's usually a period for an earnout. So the performance of the company needs to get to a certain threshold and to acquire the full, so an enterprise value is created at the original deal, but there's a closing amount that's provided, but usually over 2 to 3 years, there's earnouts. And so there's certain profitability that needs to be created by the business for the owner to obtain their full enterprise value. And so, that's really important to understand. Again, if you're not focused on the business for 3 to 4 months, it could affect the earnout on the business.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. That is so... These are like golden nuggets, guys. I hope everyone stayed until the end here, where we're just... The best stuff is right at the end. Okay. So there is one question that I ask everybody that comes on the show, and that's not necessarily related to what you've spoken about during the show. And that is, what is one social norm that you want to push back on?
That is a good question. I think I'm going to go the social media route. And so I still think, although there's more recognition of social media, I think there's two things. The social norm is it's okay to have your cell phone out, and from a business perspective, but also as a personal perspective, that if your phone is going off or you're wearing an Apple Watch and you text, that you're like, you can check it. And I'm like, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
I know it's hard because I do the same thing, but yeah, the social norm would be just to be more present and put the phone away, even in meetings during the day at work, being more present with who's in front of you, rather than being distracted by who's trying to get a hold of you and get your attention. I think that's a social norm that I'm certainly working on. I think another social norm that I think is really important is, despite how busy you are from work or personal, is always just finding time to center yourself. And it doesn't have to take a long time, but, taking away time for other people and certainly work. You can always find time for 10 minutes of meditation or being outside or drinking a coffee in a comfortable place. If you can find time for that, you will be able to have a more effective and efficient, productive day for everyone else. And I do think things are getting better that way. But I think the social norm, and from a leadership standpoint, and people really out there working so hard for their families and their business and their boss and their parents and everyone, it's okay to take time for yourself, no matter where that is and when it is.
What's that again?
Right?
Take time off? Go run a marathon, go travel alone, go do these awesome things that I've seen that you're taking ass at.
Well, even, you can have, it's all balance, and balance doesn't happen every day. It happens over your lifetime. I mean, even this past week. I'm in Cancun, but I really was excited to, meet with you, and the timing's perfect. I'm not distracted, and I had a relaxing morning, and then I can do this too. So it's okay. It's okay to take time.
Oh yeah, and on that note,
they try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying.
No more excuses. No more branding band-aids.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for this badass discussion and sharing the Timber Tech Truss journey up to now. Looking forward to seeing the future and the adoptions. And to you, my badass listener, thanks for tuning in. You can reach out to Wendy from the show notes, as well as access to that brand health check. And if you loved this episode, drop a 5-star review.
The art of positioning.
This should not be published. I have plenty of those moments where I'm just like, oh, why did I say that? Just
well, we've had those moments this last 10 days in Mexico for sure. It's been good.
And boss, you deserve it. Like, I was reading through your about, like when I go through the intro, it doesn't have much of that because you said that in afterwards. But I was reading the about and I was like, girl, you've done a lot. Wait, okay, I want to know, which country did you travel around by yourself? Or which countries?
So I've been a few, and it's such an amazing experience. Iceland. I traveled. I was with a group for 3 days, and then I traveled by myself, and also Portugal. So I did a 6-day hike in the Azore Islands. And again, it was with a group of people, but I went to the destination by myself. Mm-hmm. And so it is such an amazing experience. A lot of people don't have the opportunity or have, a fear of traveling by yourself, but it is a completely different experience when you travel on your own. Like, your senses are heightened. You're not obviously spending time on your phone because you need to be aware, even just from a security standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful experience. And so, yeah. It's been really cool, and now I sort of crave it.
I feel like you're also experiencing that place from a whole different, if you're there with somebody else, you're thinking about, okay, are you hungry? Are you even if you don't intentionally want to, you're like, oh, let's make sure that this other person is okay. But if you're just there yourself, you're like, what if I wander down there? What if I go into the shop? It doesn't matter. So good.
It doesn't matter. And also, the coolest experience is when you're in a restaurant. And don't get me wrong, I love traveling with people too. It's just a totally different, amazing awareness. So you're in a restaurant, and instead of engaging like you and I over a meal, you're having more awareness of what's in front of you. You're observing other tables, the architecture, the art, because you have no distractions. And so, yeah, it's quite cool.
And you end up making the most interesting connections. I feel like I start random conversations with people, like, somebody sits next to me, or they're also admiring of you, and then you mention something, and then it ends up being a whole adventure, and it's amazing. Gods.
Well, and that's the other beautiful thing, is there's so many really incredible people in the world, and the conversations and the people you meet through those experiences are, it's really memorable. And also, now when I notice people who are traveling or by themselves, I usually engage in a conversation just to understand, what they're doing, and what, maybe not like why they're by themselves, but you just have really interesting conversations with people. Yeah.
So cool. I love it. Oh my God. So I had to ask you about that before we go into it, because I was like, I want to know more, because that's also a favorite thing for me, and which I plan to get back into at some point.
Yeah. Well, and I was I was married really young and in university, and was married 25 years and had children, and, really didn't think I didn't have a desire to do it. And it was just one of those things that was really scary. And, but I did it, and it was, just empowering. But also I was like, almost, it's addictive. Like it becomes a really cool thing that you look forward to.
Maybe that'll come back again in the last question. I think I mentioned to you, like right at the end, I asked one question to everybody, which is like about the social. I'm gonna like leave it to the end, but
okay.
Anyway, before we get started, let me just check a couple of details. It's a second generation family business, yeah?
Yeah, yes, it was
1980?
for 40 years. Yeah.
Okay.
And then 2023 is when I became partners with private equity, and now we're
I took that one out just in case, but we can always add that, like we can talk about it. But and then you acquired those two companies within 12 months, yeah?
18 months, yeah. Within 18 months, yeah. So the stair company in June of 2024, and then the prefab wall and framing business June of 2025.
Okay, I'll change that to 18. And then like the start, like it's a little bit of an intro, and then I'll start off with a fun question, just tongue in cheek. And
let's freaking go.